This is chapter 38 in your new Wilkins edition 13, chapter 38. It's all about instrument sharpening. So, burnished calculus directly impacts periodontal health. So, when I see thin, flat, burnished calculus at the CEJ with an endoscope, there is always inflammation and ulceration of the pocket wall opposite the calculus, as well as bleeding on probing. This was in a Dimensions magazine, and it was from an hygienist named Anna Pattison, and this is what we're trying to avoid. So when you are scaling with instruments that are not sharp, this is what you're producing. You're producing burnished calculus. Burnished calculus would look like a mound. It's like you're getting the very surface. Instead of going in and putting your instrument underneath an edge on the calculus and pulling it all off, you're like almost at the edge, and as you scrape across it, you're scraping across the surface, and you're making this flat burnished area with no edges. And then when you go down there, it begins to feel like part of the tooth instead of a piece of calculus, and then we don't get it off, and this is what it's causing. So let's talk about sharpening stones. There's natural abrasive stones and there's artificial materials. Natural abrasive stones are like they have an Arkansas stone, used because it has really fine abrasive particle sizes. It's quarried and from mineral deposits in the state of Arkansas. It's preferred for routine sharpening and finishing. They have a fine, a medium, and a coarse stone. First coarse, then fine. And so if you would, they're saying if you were to use one of these, you go to the coarse side first and then the fine side to just kind of smooth it down. And you can use water or oil on natural abrasive stones. And then we're going to talk about artificial materials. Artificial materials, they have hard, they're not metal, they're substances, and they're impregnated with aluminum oxide, the silicon carbide, or diamond particles, such as you'll hear talk about an India stone, a ruby stone, carborundum stones, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and a diamond stone. They're man-made stones. And so, in other words, they're synthetic. Then most of them need light oil, and they're for routine sharpening and finishing. So mostly on the stones that we are going to use, oil can be used on them, but we're not going to do that. We'll use it dry or with water drops. So here are the stones that you received. You've got this dual grit. It's a ceramic stone on one side. It's coarse grit with a fine grit. And the blue coarse side is for finishing and honing. This wedge-shaped stone has medium grit. It combines a really flat surface, then you have rounded edges on the side for sharpening straight and for any curved edges. And you have this conical Arkansas stone. It's a really super fine grit for curved edges and facial surfaces as scalers. One of these really helps after you have sharpened an edge, it really helps to be able to use this across the edge and get off all these minute little shavings that you'll see in a minute. Here's sharpening systems. You'll hear talk in the industry about having a sidekick that helps sharpen, and that is something that you put your instrument into, and there'll be a side for your universals. There'll be a side for your scalers, your pointed scalers, and there is a place to put your Gracies into that help and aid in sharpening. Then you have your Gleason guide, which we'll be doing next week. It's this metal shaped, and these are things that help and assist in trying to hopefully get a sharp edge. When you test for sharpness, you do a visual or glare test. So I know this was on my boards back in the late 70s. A cutting edge is super fine. It's a super fine line, so it cannot, if light is shining on it, it will not reflect. So when your edge is dull, it's rounded and it's thicker, so it will reflect the light. And so if you just hold your edge up to the light and it reflects that light, you know that it's dull. So there may be still a few sharp little places here and there, but if you're getting any dull places on your edge, then I would sharpen the whole thing. And then when you look up at it, if you don't get that edge, if you can't see light reflecting, then you know it's sharp. It's a sharp line. So we also have plastic testing stick, which can confirm the sharpness. It's called a test stick, and you have them. They're blue, those blue, and they're lucite. And you'll be learning how to test for sharpness. This is an example of an edge that is dull, and you can see how it is reflecting the light. So this should be coming out to a point, and then up here on both sides. And instead, as it's being sharpened at a wrong angle. And so, or it's just a matter that it's being used so much that it's worn the edge away. And now when you are scaling, you're going to be scaling and scaling, and not much will come off. You may get little pieces here and there due to the edges that are already there, but it'll take you a long time to get calculus off. And so that's not only frustrating to you, but it can be frustrating and a little hurtful to the patient for you to keep going over and over and over one area and still not have removed the calculus. This is another example of an actual end of a cutting edge end of an instrument, and you can see to where this side, if you put that down on paper, you see that how this side, the right side over here, it has that light on it right there, and so you know that that's dull, because if that were a sharp edge like the picture on the left, you put it down and it does not reflect any light, so you know that that's sharp. Here again shows little wire edges as you are sharpening and you're moving a stone up and down. Sometimes you can be moving it with more pressure at the top or more pressure at the bottom, and we need to hold a really balanced pressure on that stone so that we don't get one side a little bit more. These are two different types of little edges that will, they're kind of almost microscopic, and then we'll be showing you how you take those off. These are the wire edges after sharpening. So if you're moving up and down, which you're supposed to do, but one thing that you're supposed to do is always end on a downstroke. So if you always end on a downstroke, you won't have these little metal burrs. And sometimes you won't have as many of them. But we take the edge of a stone and go flat across that surface, and that cuts all those little metal burrs off. And that's why we do that. And hopefully you've been shown that, or you will be tomorrow. So here's a universal curette, area specific, which are your Gracies, and a scalar, which is pointed. And your universals have, of course, an edge that you need to sharpen on both sides, and you also need to sharpen the toe. The toe is considered a cutting edge, and you'll be shown that. This Gracie, you just sharpen on one side and around the toe. And then a scaler, you sharpen both sides, but you're sharpening them to a point. This is so true. As hygienists, most hygienists don't really like the act of sharpening. And part of it is because you're afraid that they're going to ruin their instruments. But the only way that you get good at it is by doing it. And the advice would be to sharpen them at the first sign of dullness. So when you're taking off a lot of calculus, like you will be doing on most of the patients here in the clinic, if you sharpen them at the first sign of dullness, or after you've had a couple patients that have that kind of calculus, and then you just sharpen just very quickly. It's just a matter of going up and down a couple times to sharpen them. If you wait till they get dull, sometimes you're sharpening and sharpening because you've got to reestablish a sharp edge from around a dull one, and that takes a lot more metal off of your instrument, and it takes a lot more work. So you can see here this is a universal curette that they're showing on the left, number A, because it is straight across, and this will need to be sharpened on both sides. And so you want to place your stone like that, and of course on a scaler, you're going to have a sharp edge at both sides. It's going to go to a point, but you want this side sharpened, and here you have the degrees. 70 to 80 degrees on the instrument will be from the side to the edge, and it'll be 110 degrees between the edge and the angle that you put your stone. When you're sharpening, you always hold your instrument in your non-dominant hand, and you will hold it still. Either put your elbow up on the table and hold it exactly like you see the hand here holding it. It's a palm grasp with all of your fingers down around the instrument. So you hug it into the palm of the hand. And this is for stability. If you put your thumb up like this and you put it up here on the shank, that helps it, because when you put pressure down here, or I'm going to say down here with that stone, it wants to move the top of the stone. And so you want to keep that perfectly straight, and with your thumb up there, that helps keep it straight. This person, you can do it this way as well, has the side of the palm of their hand on a table edge, and that's what's helping that stay stable, and you can do that too. And then 4 to 5 strokes ending on a downstroke, which you'll have less metal shavings that way. So you want to be able just to do 4 or 5 strokes. If you wait for it to get dull, you'll be doing many more strokes than that. So you hold your instrument stable and still, and then you take the stone, and the stone you're moving up and down against that blade. When you do the other side, this is showing kind of going, you want to have the instrument in front of you, and you're doing the other side. And this side, and then that. And when you're doing that, you always want to make sure that on any blade, there's the heel, which is back here in the back, and then there's the middle, in the middle, and then there's the toe, which is up here. So when you're moving this stone up and down, you start at the heel, and you want the exact amount of pressure, and you literally say to yourself, heel, middle, toe, because just saying that will help you some people bear down with a lot of pressure with that stone on the heel, and they don't realize they're lightening up in the middle, and then bear down heavy again on the toe. That is eventually going to cause you to not have a straight edge anymore. So you need to have the same amount of pressure going up and down against the side of that blade in order for you to have an even edge, heel, middle, and toe. So here would be the sides and the lower shank of the scaler and the curette. So when you do a curette, universal curette, you're going to do this side, that side, and you're going to do the toe last, and we'll show you how to do the toe. It's a whole different kind of, you handle it all different. So the care of your sharpening equipment on a flat sharpening stone. They can be sterilized, so you prepare for sterilization. You either can place it in your cassette if there's room. It can go in a hydrum, which a hydrum is like a dishwasher for dental paraphernalia, and people can use that instead of using the ultrasonic bath. We did have a hydrum. We don't have it anymore. It broke so much and got so expensive to keep fixing over about 8 years that we finally just took it out. Great idea, doesn't always last real long. So you can submerge it in an ultrasonic bath, in an ultrasonic cleaner, and have it vibrate, or scrub it with soap and water if it happens to get really dirty. If it gets stained at some point later on, you can use ammonia. They say gasoline or kerosene. I would be very careful with that if the stone becomes discolored. So the stone glazed by metal particles. You rub sandpaper over the stone on a flat surface, and that can help clean stain off of that. Storage, you can store them in cassettes. Do not use oil lubricant on the stone during your appointment, as there's no way to sterilize the oil. And so we don't have oil. A lot of private practices, I have used oil before. It comes in a little tiny squirt bottle, really tiny. We don't use oil for that reason at the clinic. And we don't use it because then if you put a stone into an ultrasonic bath, it gets oil on everything else that's in there. So we just are not using the oil. You always use your manufacturer's directions for all artificial stones because they will have different directions. Then after you've sharpened your instrument, you can hold this stick in your non-dominant hand, and you can fulcrum with your ring finger on it's kind of the side of the top, and you put pressure on it. Then you can pretend like this blue plastic stick is a tooth. So you would position yourself, and you're just doing one tooth. So you'd fulcrum kind of on the top or the side of the top of it, and then you're going to put the blade on the plastic stick, and you're going to keep pulling up. And if it makes little shavings of the lucite stick come off, then you know it's sharp. If none of it comes off and it just rubs across it, you'll know that you need to get back to the sharpening stone.